All right, guys, we are back at Pete Maina's house, and we are going to have a talk today about World Record Muskies. And whether you believe it or not, that is going to be a little bit of the topic. We got a great guest with us. We got legendary muskie angler and did a lot of historian work through over the years, legendary fisherman Larry Ramsell. I've had an opportunity to work with Larry in the past at an event that they do every single year at the Vermilion Dam Lodge. It's the Larry Ramsell outing. So if you ever want to go and learn from this guy, he's got a wealth of knowledge. Go check it out sometime. It's a great event. Lots of guys come together at that event and share knowledge. And there's some other guys speaking there as well as Larry. And Larry's got a ton of information that he gives up. And today we're hoping that he gives up some really good information about what's going on recently with some of the record stuff. And we've got Pete here to really dive in and give him some tough questions and see how it all pans out. Pete, through the years, has really said that this whole Louis Spraith record is bogus, and a lot of guys in the industry, including myself, agree with him. So we're going to dive into some of that stuff right now.
Well, pretty much all of the records from the old days are bogus, but we should maybe call this Liars Suck, Larry.
Yeah.
That might be a great name for all of
Better than
this.
Muskie Suck, right?
Yeah, well, as long as I did the Muskie Suck thing. But, you know, this is something very seriously that Larry and I talked about doing, quite a few years ago now, actually with the guy Jerry Newman that kind of headed up the World Muskie Alliance that was dedicated to looking into the records. I believe it was the top 3 records recognized that they did analysis on and provided results on. But I want to stick more to the whole experience of the thing. For me personally, as somebody that dug into it, me as an extremely young guy when I was exposed to all of this, when there was still a tremendous amount of guys like 50, 60 years my senior, that I ended up talking about all of this and what I experienced from what they told me and common sense told me. And then when this whole thing got stirred up, which you were obviously involved with, Larry, and Larry, by the way, this was more me as a guide and me trying to figure things out on the truth side for myself. But Larry Ramsell, I don't think this is arguable at all. There's nobody that's studied the history and knows more about the history of muskies and muskie fishing, what was caught, where it was caught, this, that, and the other. So, you know, I'm gonna let him kind of handle more of that. I might be asking him a few questions, but he can certainly hold his own on that. But really looking into, flat out the line end of it, to me it's a great time because there's a lot of things being exposed in our world completely otherwise. And for a lot of reasons, I'm most interested more than ever in trying to figure out what the truth is, who the liars are, and I would emphasize that in any walk of life, that's a real important thing to try and figure out very quickly before I let Larry go. One thing I've always respected Larry, knowing that what he's done over the years, but he ended up doing somewhat of a turn on what his thought process were and whether or not he was behind the Hayward Hall of Fame on some of the record turnovers that were going on based on analysis and facts and the truth, which is something that seems to be hard to do. A lot of people get the truth slapped in their face over and over and over again, but are willing to ignore it. And Larry and I were through a lot with this whole thing. Really, you more than me in actuality.
It's been a 30-year battle. Yeah, pretty much the last 30 years it's been a nightmare, actually.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It certainly shouldn't have been a nightmare.
Yeah, you know, back in the old days, records were not really scrutinized well. Every resort had a scale, but I'm sure 95% of them were never certified, but they were probably close. And that's what was acceptable back in the day. And then in '39, I think Louis Spray decided he needed to figure out a way to generate some business for his tavern in town, and thought a world record might draw some people into his bar, which it has done ever since.
Yeah, that always works.
And then I think in 1949, to get back to Spray, in 1939 we were getting ready to go into the war. The Depression was ending. Tourism was at a low ebb. And so Louis did what he thought he needed to do to generate some income. Can't fault him for that, but
No.
he used Muskie Records to do it, and that was the wrong part of it. Then in '49, when Cal Johnson caught his supposed record, I think he did it as an altruistic means to help generate some business for Hayward. He lived in Hayward, he supported Hayward, he wrote about Hayward, and we were just coming out of the war. And again, tourism was at a very low ebb in the Hayward area back when we used to have around 400 resorts in this area. And so, I mean, why else would he give away a supposed world record fish if it wasn't just to help generate business for the area? So then, of course, Louis' ego wouldn't allow him to put up with that, so he told him that he would come up with a new record by the end of the year, and of course he did.
I love that one.
Yeah, it's just, he's the only man in history that's caught a muskie over 60 pounds, supposedly, in the state of Wisconsin. I mean,
3 times, right?
Right. Yeah, well, the first one was 59 and a half
Right.
pounds, 60-pound class fish.
Sloppy burp away from, very close. Very
But
close.
in all the other years, there's been nothing over 55 pounds caught by anybody in the history of the state of Wisconsin. So to think that he could catch 3 bigger than everybody else put together that either lived in the state of Wisconsin for 50 years or came fishing from Illinois or wherever, that's too much of a stretch to believe, I think. So then, of course, when I got involved with the Hall of Fame initially, I was World Record Secretary. I developed the World Record program for the Hall of Fame. We accepted to start the records that were established by Field and Stream, which at that point, Art Lawton's St. Lawrence River fish from New York was then the world record. Well, in 1992, John Detloff went on a crusade to discount every huge muskie in history except those caught in this area,
Right.
Hayward area. So that was suspect right off the bat. And he used amateur photo analysis to debunk Lawton's fish and then subsequently everything else except the Hayward fish. But then when the WRMA with Jerry Newman came along and got professional photogrammetry done on Spray's 2 biggest records and Cal Johnson's record, then the proof was in the pudding. That they were absolutely nowhere near in the fresh fish body as claimed, and as it turned out in the mounted fish. I've always told people, if you want to buy me a beer, we'll go to the Moccasin Bar and I'll show you how Carl Common made Johnson's fish look like it was 67 and a half pounds, when in reality it might have weighed 45 pounds. And that's even suspect where he got it. As you know, you've heard the story about the pool below the Moose Lake Dam and on the Chippewa River, and so who knows about that. But the fact of the matter is, it's been scientifically proven by the best photogrammetry expert in North America. So you got to put your hat on that one. But the Hall of Fame, Detloff absolutely refused. In fact, what made me so mad, and I resigned from the Hall of Fame, as did Brad Levitas, who had been a governor for the Hall for 35 years.
That's right. I forgot about Brad resigning as well.
The methods that Detloff used to disqualify Lawton's fish were used by the WRMA and Jerry Newman to analyze Spray's fish. Well, Detloff wouldn't have anything to do with that. He ignored half of the methods that he used to disqualify Lawton's fish. He wouldn't even acknowledge them as far as the WRMA's report, like silhouettes that, supposedly represented a fish that was 60-some inches long versus everything else. And then the other thing that irritated me was Lawton had about 5 affidavits from witnesses that actually saw the weighing of the fish. And then after Detloff did his report in '92, and the Hall disqualified it, and the IGFA just set it aside pending further review, the original witnesses that were still alive, plus a couple others that were around at the time, signed new affidavits. So there's a double set of affidavits supporting the weight of Lawton's fish. And when IGFA set it aside, the reasoning was supposedly because there wasn't a photograph that they were comfortable with that was of the actual fish that was claimed to be 69 pounds 15 ounces. Well, we don't know because Lawton was dead, so he couldn't say what. We don't know whether the pictures that were published in Field and Stream and Outdoor Life were the actual fish and the pictures that he actually gave them, or whether they just published whatever looked the best in the magazine. So it's an unknown. And but the fact that IGFA said it's just on the basis of a picture, they've since changed their tune, and now it's that a all-tackle world record is based strictly on the weight of a muskie on a scale. Well, Lawton's muskie was not only certified on a state-inspected scale, but the affidavits that were signed at the time were re-affidavitted in '92 after Detloff came out with his investigation. So how much do you need to prove that fish should still be the world record? Because the weight on the scale is the record, and they got that plenty of affidavits to back it up. The fact that they don't know whether there's a legitimate picture of that exact fish or not is kind of a secondary and a moot point, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
So you can't have it both ways. So
No, you definitely can't have it both ways. And I would emphasize what you pointed out. Obviously Detloff is an amateur at photo analysis. He's not qualified. His work has never been used in a trial or anything like that. These guys were actual experts, and not only did they produce that evidence, it was peer reviewed as well.
Exactly, by other scientists.
Yep, given an exact range where the fish could fall into, and technically it wasn't even close.
Right.
So,
like as far as sprays fish, it was almost 8 inches.
Right.
Less than what it was claimed to be.
Yeah.
So it was a mess. So anyway, that all kind of took place around 2006, 2007. So after the smoke cleared, I'd resigned. Brad had resigned from the Hall. Back in the 90s, I'd resigned from IGFA over the record thing. And I'd been an IGFA rep for 16 years, and so I washed my hands of them. And so in 2006, I began a new record program. I took a look at all the rules of both organizations, the IGFA, the International Game Fish Association in Florida, and the National Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame here in Hayward. And I shouldn't really say this, but if anybody wanted to cheat and get a world record today, with either one of those two organizations, I can show you how to do it, because the rules are not foolproof. Right. The rules that I wrote for the new modern day muskie world record program are foolproof. We got to have somebody on the scene before the fish is ever cut open. We reweigh the fish to see if it's in the ballpark of what it weighed when it was claimed. And then we check stomach contents, make sure there was nothing added like was done with the mallow fish. We got to have either one of our committee members or a certified biologist from the state where it's caught, like we did with the tiger muskie record, to verify that the fish is legitimate from that end. Because, for instance, this year, some guys fishing Lac Seul tried to claim a new record of 72 pounds 2 ounces. Well, they don't get that. They don't get that big.
No, they don't.
But what they didn't do is that they didn't even, when they submitted their application to IGFA, they didn't even follow all the rules. They just sent a picture in and claimed the weight. Supposedly weighted on a handheld $20 scale in the boat, which is the thing that got it disqualified, because IGFA won't accept anything weighed in the boat, but they will accept it if you pull the boat to shore and take a weight of the fish, even if you want to release it. In fact, IGFA even they recommend releasing a world record, all tackle world record fish, if possible, without killing the fish. Well, if the corpus delicti is gone, how are you going to check out whether it was ever legitimate or not? And that's how you beat those two organizations' rules. You can get witnesses, you can get a certified scale, you can take pictures, let the fish go. Nobody can ever prove whether it was that big or whether it had something in it or anything like that. So that's why I just knew, as far as the muskie world, as far as other world records, I don't care about those. But the muskie world record has been so controversial for 50 years that I thought, if I build a program with the rules that are so stringent that it can't be beat, then if somebody does get a giant, then we're going to know for sure what is legitimate and what it actually weighs. Our current record, we've only had one fish entered in our program since 2006. That's how rare these big fish are. It weighed 58 pounds even. The fish was caught in October in Michigan. It was sent to Minnesota to a taxidermist in April. I went over there, I reweighed the fish, I waited until they opened the fish up, checked the stomach contents, the fish, and remeasured the fish, made sure everything was legitimate. It was an inch difference from what they had claimed initially, because I think they measured it over the curve of the body. But the straight line measurement on it was 58 inches, it weighed 58, but it was still, when it was originally weighed, it weighed a little bit over 58 pounds, but the scale that they were using didn't have the delineations, so you have to go to the next one down. So 58 even was what it was certified at, but it was actually just a little bit more than that. When I reweighed it, this is over 4 months later, it still weighed 58 pounds, and plus a little bit.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. And the stomach contents, the only thing that was in there was a skeleton of a 13.5-inch smallmouth. All the meat was gone, the head was gone, all the bones from the head was gone, and the other thing that was in there was 2 1/3 pounds of eggs, which told me this fish was at the end of its lifespan anyway, and wasn't going to spawn the following year, because it should have had 8 to 10, maybe 20 pounds of eggs in it if it had been a real productive female.
Yeah.
The Canadian record that's accepted is Ken O'Brien's supposed 65-pounder out of the Moon River. I weighed that fish 8 days after it was caught, and it weighed 58 pounds. Or 56 pounds, excuse me. So they claimed 65, and a week later, 8 days later, it lost 9 pounds. But yet the current modern day record, 4.5 months later, still weighed exactly what it weighed when it was caught. So something wasn't right. What I think, and I don't say anybody did it on purpose, but I think that fish got, when they hung it up and it was dirty, they washed it off with a hose, and I think they got water inside the fish. A gallon of water weighs over 8 pounds.
Yeah.
And that was close to the difference that I found when I got there and reweighed it. And I weighed it on 2 different scales and had them checked by weights and measures.
Oh, okay.
So fish just don't lose 9 pounds in a week.
No.
It's just not going to happen. So that's how I knew that one probably wasn't legitimate, even though I don't think anybody did it intentionally, although I do think they fudged the length a little bit. But won't get into details on that. But the current day, modern day record, 58 pounds, 58 inches, is legitimate, and I'd stake my life on it.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're waiting for somebody else to get us a legitimate 60, and we'll have proof that they do grow up at least 60 pounds. But these 70 pounders, I have my doubts. Lawton caught a lot of big fish. Whether he caught a 69-pound 15-ouncer, I don't know. But I do know that he caught a lot of really big fish. In fact, even Detloff didn't have a problem with a 65-pound 13-ouncer that he caught in 1959. So I'm 95% comfortable with his 69-15, but there's still 5% of me that has a little bit of a doubt. But
yeah. Well, the problem with all of this, and the line end of it at the end of the day, is just it sets an unrealistic bar, and that's the absolute shame of it.
And it's a record that'll never be broken.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true too. But I always think back of the what was the guy, Dick Slate, wasn't it? The guided to a couple of 50-pounders.
Yeah.
And Ray Kennedy, I believe, and there's been a handful of other ones, but the 50-pounders that were legitimately caught, which are as big as they get, basically in the state, you know as well as I do, Larry, even on the absolute best fisheries, the vast majority of female muskies never even attain 50 pounds.
No, they're lucky to make 40.
Yeah, that's the oddballs. Like my buddy Christian Leitner, the 7-footers get that size. But it's an amazing accomplishment for somebody that actually got a legit 50-pounder, and it's taken away essentially by line. And that's a good lead-in though for what the one thing I wanted to get out of this more than the history end of it is how I came into it, and how I really felt sorry after I looked into everything for all of the guides, the old-timer guides that I talked about, that I started guiding with as a late teenager. And I had never really put it together until after talking to them, what they were dealing with because of lies as well, like the people that actually caught a 50-pounder and didn't really get the credit due. So long story short, I know you knew Jess Ross.
Sure.
So at the time, I'm guiding years ago, and I have people that are inquisitive about world records. I'd never really even talked about that much in the boat. I know one thing I sure never thought about it, because I hadn't even caught a 30-pounder yet. I hadn't guided anyone to a 30-pounder. Of course, those are coming off the days that we killed everything, so there was hardly any fish around anyway of any size, but I hadn't really thought of it, and they're quizzing me about records and stuff, and I'd heard Louis Spray's name and Kel Johnson, but that's about all I knew. So I come off of that conversation, I bump into Jess Ross, who knew Louis, was around when they flooded the Chippewa Flow, just that and the other, nicest guy on earth. Never seemed like he's mad at anybody, and then all of a sudden he got real mad at me, because I asked him at the boat landing, and I said, yeah, tell me about this Louis Spray guy. These guys were asking me, and the next time I'm out guiding, I want to be a little more knowledgeable. But, well, I got somewhere along the line after mentioning Louis's name, and I was immediately cut off by Jess's face and neck got purple, and the veins were standing out on his neck, and he started hollering about what a no-good so-and-so Louis Spray was. And that he was guiding the same day he caught the record. He was on or near Fleming's bar all day, never saw blah, 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 blah. And so I finally calmed him down a little bit, but I kind of, and this is before all of the records controversy, but then I kind of like hearing what I heard, and this guy that was normally the nicest guy on earth was literally screaming at me about what this guy was like. I went out on my own little researching from a common sense standpoint to try and figure out what the hell was going on. Well, there's a bunch of old guides, Paul Quayle and Ken Eck and Arnie Jewell and Irv Schnell, and all these guys have been around for years and years and years. So from a common sense standpoint, one thing I thought of is, well, these guys are all guiding every day. What's their biggest muskies? I don't remember exactly, but basically, of course, we killed basically everything in those days. It was somewhere in the range of 32, 33 pounds to 42 or 43 pounds. That these guys that are out guiding every day, those are the biggest muskies that had ever gotten in their boat. And they basically confirmed the same thing that Jess had told me, that Louis was full of crap. I guess it was, without getting into a bunch of other wild stories, it was a known thing that if you got a muskie, didn't matter, dynamite, spearing, catching, whatever, it was for sale. Louis would give you $100 for it. That was kind of standard information back then. And so when I put all of that together, I immediately, all before this crap started with the Hall of Fame and Detloff and whatever, in my mind, from a common sense standpoint, how in the hell could one guy catch 360-pound fish when these guys are basically in the 30-pound range? And then I put myself in their shoes, guiding in those days. you got people coming around and right there's the local hype and they want to catch what Louis caught and what Cal caught, right? So if you're an honest guide and they come to you and they say, oh, well, what can we expect to catch today? We going to get a 60-pounder today? Like Louis did? Of course, if you're honest, you're sitting there going, well, biggest one I've ever had in my boat's like half that size, but you know, I mean, what a situation to be in.
I tell you what, I would seriously doubt if he ever caught anything over 35 pounds.
Oh,
personally,
I would agree
from
with
pictures
that.
I've seen, you know, and I used to correspond with him, and in fact, he tried to bribe me not to use one of the pictures of his supposed 49 world record because it didn't make the fish look big enough. Because if you look at all of Louis' pictures, they're all taken from a very low angle.
Yeah.
Which makes the fish look bigger. Plus, he's got them out in front of him as far as he can get them, which changes perspective, which also makes them look better.
We've all figured that out for social media these days.
Oh, yeah. Everybody does.
Wide-angle lenses help a lot, too. But if Louis only had one of those.
He just had a brownie, so, yeah.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is, 1959 record, there's no pictures of him at all with it.
Yeah, that's right.
The only picture that exists is Alton Van Camp.
Yeah.
And his son said that a bunch of weight disappeared out of their garage the day after Louis was there with that fish. So
I heard all of that too. We could probably do about 4 or 5 hours of what we've heard just on that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Where it came from and who bought who and whatever. But the single biggest point I think with all of that is just that you know, they weren't that big and I hate to see how, you know, everything has gotten skewed because of that, and to a certain extent, I guess you would agree, Larry. I know you're disappointed. You and I have talked about this quite a bit, and in fact, when I talked to you about doing this interview, again, I know you said we'll probably never accomplish anything with the Hall of Fame record system. We're not going to change anything. I agree with that at this point. They seem to be kind of stubborn against reality, but the majority of people, I think, understand, and that's technically, all of the stuff aside, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, particularly serious muskie fishermen.
Yeah.
They all know that they're not legitimate.
Right.
The people that get hoodwinked are the tourists that maybe fish once or twice in their life for muskies and think they got a shot at something like that. And it's not going to happen.
Yeah, they're hard enough to catch without worrying about catching a 60-pounder.
Yeah.
Dave Brown, by the way, you've been back there real quiet. How many 60-pounders have you seen swimming around?
Yeah, I've fished a long time, Pete, and I've seen one fish that I can say was an absolute giant. And I've got a couple that are in that 40-pound range myself, and I can say that I saw one on Vermilion that was really, really, really big. That seemed maybe that 50-pound class.
Yeah.
And I've seen one.
Oh, that's a place they've come from.
Yeah. Well, I've been at it for 65 years, so I've been pretty lucky enough to fish with some of the best guides on the planet. I've been lucky enough to catch 2 over 50 pounds on weight on a certified scale, and I probably got like 16 over 40 pounds, but I've been at it a long, long time, and I spend a lot of time at it.
Yeah.
But the main thing is, and what I tell people when I do seminars is you have to fish where big fish grow. I say, if your lake record where you're fishing is 33 pounds, then guess what? You're never going to catch a world record out of that puddle.
No.
It's not there. It don't exist. So you got to go where big fish grow.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. You're only as good as your fishery, all of the other stuff aside.
Right. I mean, you could be the greatest muskie fisherman on the planet, but if you don't fish where big muskies are, you ain't never going to catch one.
Yeah.
But if you live on big fish water, then you can catch a lot of them.
Yeah, if you're on the St. Lawrence or St. Clair or a Mille Lacs, and you
Georgian Bay.
Yeah, you don't want to get too big for your britches, comparing yourself to someone that's, mainly fishing smaller fish water where it's just
I mean,
not
it's
as
totally
likely.
relative. Technically, they should have world records by lake size. You know, to give everybody an even playing field.
Yeah, you could.
Well, you know, you and I have fished most of our life in these lakes around here, and I don't know if you know a whole lot about the differences. Bernard LeBeau tried to prove, and he thinks he did prove, that there's two different species of muskies.
Right.
Muskies in waters like the St. Lawrence and Georgian Bay, where muskies and northern pike have always coexisted. And then waters like we have a lot of around here were just muskies only waters. Now we've got a lot of waters that pike have gotten into, and that's muddied the water a little bit. But historically, all of the big fish, all of the high 50-pound and over fish have come out of waters that have always has muskies and pike together. Those muskies in those waters have a different spawning strategy. They spawn twice, where those in lakes that don't only muskies in them, they only spawn once and they don't grow big.
Right.
And it's that simple. So if you're fishing a lake that's never had northern pike in it, odds of you catching a 40-pounder are almost non-existent, let alone a 70-pounder or a 60-pounder. So,
Oh, yeah.
you got to have big fish genetics. My biggest one was 57 1/4 inches long. It weighed 54 pounds, 6.5 ounces. So
Monster.
that's what it takes to. And this was a late December fish, when they're full of eggs. They're putting on fat for the winter. That's why everybody gets excited about big fish in the fall, is because they're heavier. One of the guys I fish with, he don't get excited till mid-October.
Right.
He said in November they'll weigh 10 pounds more than they weighed in August. Just from bulking up with fat and eggs and putting on the feed bag for winter. So that's the best time to catch them.
Yeah, I am quite certain, even though I kind of don't worry about exact weights and measures. I've caught 40-pounders, and I think a fair amount, but I've definitely not caught a 50.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple, but
I know you fished the St. Lawrence for a few years, pretty heavy, but it was summertime, and they're not going to be that heavy in the summertime.
Right.
My friend Klaus Strabe from Chicago, he caught a 58.5 incher on the St. Lawrence in August, but it didn't weigh 50 pounds.
Right.
Because it was a summer fish.
Oh yeah, they can.
Give me that fish in
vary a
November,
lot.
and he's got his 50-pounder easy.
Right.
Probably 55.
Larry, we mentioned Rich Clark the other day. He caught a lot of big fish. What do you know? What some of them sizes were?
Well, his biggest one that's been publicized was 60 by 29 or 30, something like that. So it's a pretty big fish.
Well, in the 50-pound range.
Yeah, maybe even 60. Big fish. Big fish. What I found strange was he had 2 scales on board and didn't weigh the fish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, but it's a giant. You can tell by the picture.
For sure, yeah. He caught a lot of big fish back in the day. I mean,
Yeah.
he really did. I mean, and to his credit, we've talked about this numerous times. I mean, you guys have been doing this for a long time too. There's probably, I don't even know if we could say how many 50-pound fish in the last 20 years that have come. Not a huge number.
Probably more than you think, though. Particularly these last few years when guys are gotten tight-mouthed. You know, when they get a really big one, like there's been a couple 59.5 inchers that were weighed, caught in the last couple of years, and they made a lot of noise. But there's a lot of guys out there catching fish, big fish, and not talking about it. So
I know Jason Hammerneck had a couple in the boat that were really close to, he thought were close to the state record.
yeah.
And
Matt too, he caught one that he won't even tell anybody how big it was.
Yeah.
So,
Seifert.
yeah, Matt Seifert.
Okay.
It was on Mille Lacs, and then I saw the picture of it, but he hasn't, other than the guy who caught it, he hasn't told a soul how much it weighed, and he had a certified scale in the boat.
Oh, okay.
So, but I've begged him and begged him, he won't tell me, but I tell him, you know, this is history, we need to know, but I guess he don't want to be criticized for claiming a fish that size and not being able to prove it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing too, and that's now I should have my pink hat. I'll get on a rant about liars again. That's the problem with liars, having them around and having to decipher all of this, because if you didn't have a bunch of people willing to lie, you wouldn't have as much of that, where you got a guy that's worried about, here actually had a tremendous catch, and he's concerned enough about the fish, he doesn't necessarily want to drag it in and kill the son of a bitch. But then, what do you do if you try and claim how big it is and you don't have absolute proof? Well, then you're gonna catch hell, because all the liars that
Well, and that was my point with the IGFA and the Hall of Fame's record. You can weigh a fish and let it go.
Right.
The two guys with you are obviously biased.
Right.
So how can you prove whether they're telling the truth or not? How can you tell whether they filled the fish full of water before they weighed it or not?
Yeah.
And how do you know they didn't fiddle with the scale?
Yeah.
And readjust it? I mean, it's just, if you got a fish that you think is an all-tackle world record by a long ways, you got to kill it.
Right.
It's at the end of its life anyway, more than likely.
Well, that is true.
And,
that is true.
And then you get it weighed on a proper scale, and you get it checked by one of my committee or a biologist, and then everybody on the planet will accept it.
Right.
But right now, there's nobody that I know of that's going to accept, like this supposed 72-pounder they claimed this summer or this fall, because the fish is gone. It's still swimming. There's a picture of them. It doesn't look. Even your buddy Dick Pearson, he said the fish didn't weigh 50 pounds, let alone 60 pounds, let alone 70.
Right.
So nobody's seen more big fish probably than Dick. And
yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Dick. I remember back in the day fishing with him and Doug Johnson, and we talked about all this record situation on and off, because no matter who you're fishing with, it is muskie fishing, and muskie sucks, so the majority of the time you don't have anything on your line, so you have a lot of time to talk. And yeah, I mean, the whole record thing was kind of a thing we all joked about. I don't think any of us that knew a lot about it actually believed that there was a bunch of 60-pounders that got caught by anybody, and it was always quite ironic how it seemed like one 60-pounder would be a little bit bigger than the one before, and all of that stuff. We joked about that in the boat, but nobody made a big deal about it until Detloff started this whole thing where we're out to disprove everybody else's fish
except the Hayward fish. And when that process started, I wasn't necessarily in disagreement. I'm like, I don't know if this guy's qualified, and I didn't know exactly what was coming. But then all of a sudden you say everybody else is false. But Louis and Cal Johnson were absolutely telling the truth. If he'd used the same criteria with those fish, everybody would have accepted his work.
Right.
But to pick out the fish that were not caught in this area and recognize absolutely all the fish that were caught in this area versus the rest of them throwing them out, it's not right. It's just not right. He violated his fiduciary relationship with Muskie Records. Yeah,
absolutely. And it was interesting to me. I literally, at one point, Larry, after going through all of this, and I know you know what it was like, it was really interesting, and all of the people that were almost dead set on backing up the lies, and a lot of them that I talked to, and some of them even face-to-face admitting that they agreed with me and thought, yeah, it's 100% a lie, but I'm not going to do anything about it. I remember, based on the story I told before about all the old-time guides and Jess Ross and this, that, and the other, I was, you were basically asked as a well-known Hayward guide, and I'm doing TV and stuff by then, so I'm getting a fairly big name in the industry at that point. Yeah, you're basically expected to say it's true. Well, I couldn't
Can't
do that at all. And so I'm bumping up again. I'm getting my name kind of dragged through the mud constantly locally, and I'm talking to a bunch of different people and this, that, and the other. And I remember, I literally, Tex will tell you this, my dad, I showed up at his place for a beer one night. I'm like, Dad, you know, he told me for years, tell the truth, that's a good thing, this, that, and the other. I said, I've never been through so much crap in my life for telling the truth.
Oh yeah.
And there were two people in particular, local guys that were actually part of the board of directors and whatever for the Hall of Fame at the time, and that's when I was more or less whining to my dad, crying in my beer. I'm like, you know, so-and-so said this. So more or less, I had just gotten out of meetings where they basically said, yeah, Louis was a liar and this, that, and the other, and I know all of this, but what are we going to gain and what are we going to accomplish by taking the and they're my elders, so I'm not wanting to be disrespectful, but about all I can say is the truth.
Right.
Can we just have the truth? But everybody was fighting. They just didn't want to take those records.
Well, they think it's good for tourism, and that's what irritates me. Even yet today, the Chamber of Commerce is still claiming Hayward is the home of 5 World Record Muskies. I mean, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
Not what happened in 1949.
Yeah.
You know, it's just it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, that is.
It's kind of sad, actually. And that's why I said I don't care how they want to legitimize all the other fish records. But as far as muskies, if you want a legitimate new world record, it's going to have to be so airtight that everybody can accept it. There'll be nothing left to chance, and that's the way my program's rules have been written.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to do a lot of work, and you got to do it quick if you want to get a new all-tackle record. But anybody who's in that game to do it, they need to be familiar with the rules and have the right equipment before they ever leave the dock.
Yeah.
So if they don't and they can't follow all the rules, sorry about your luck.
Yeah. Well, that's
not going to legitimize something that doesn't fulfill all the rules.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
And you know what? I never really thought about this, Larry, until you brought it up. And I'll actually state this as being, having been accused at times of being like, too release-oriented and too strict, and, you know, you shouldn't do that. I get in trouble for saying, don't measure fish in the boat on bump boards and all this crap, which I actually believe in. Obviously, pictures and bump boards and everything you do aren't good for muskies. Being
Especially
in the water is the
measure
best
every
thing
damn
for
fish
them.
they catch.
But I, with regard to the record program and stuff, in reality, we get so intense about it. But literally, if you do have a female that's literally that big, it is truly at the end of its life cycle, obviously, that. So in a way where I would normally say, well, you should let them all go, but, you know, I remember letting go several big fish that are, you know, like 55 inches long, and you could tell it's going to be their last year. So, I mean, technically, I would be behind that just for the sake of making sure the record would be, you know, normally I'm like, don't kill it. But
well, it'd
at
be
that
good
stage,
for the sport, too.
It would be good for the sport to know and have and have no doubt about it,
Right.
at least.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like I said, I was 95% comfortable with Lawton's record, but in my mind, because of all the new equipment, all the new numbers of muskie fishermen in the last 25 years, and nobody's even come close to a 70-pound fish, they don't exist.
No, that's
They don't exist. So, prove me wrong, but it better be on a scale right in front of my eyes.
If I catch it, Larry, I promise to kill it. Fun with Pete, I especially promise. We'll get it on film.
Yeah. All you want to know about records is right here.
And
Yep.
you've wrote a bunch of books, Larry. Let's talk about that real quick. You have done, how many books have you
I've written or co-written 11 muskie books.
Okay.
This is my pride and joy. This is the third edition of a compendium of musky angling history. It's 2 volumes. Volume 1 is totally about the world records.
And how do guys go about getting that book?
It's available on Amazon.
Okay. And I can attest that he's got a lot of really cool stuff in there. Had an opportunity to, like I say, go to Vermilion Dam Lodge, and if you ever do, go there and see Larry. He does a great talking piece there on a lot of the stuff that we are talking about, and has a slideshow and things like that. And he's very interesting, and it's just a wealth of knowledge that you've built over this.
It's been a life's work.
Yes.
It's cost me a lot of money and 3 wives.
Pretty much all of us that are in the muskie industry have had a bunch of different wives. Anyone chasing the big ones?
I've got my second one now, and I'm gonna keep her, or I'll do my best. In Wisconsin, Larry, if anyone knows, you know. How many legit 50-pounders do you think? Let's leave out Green Bay, and the recent. I mean, but for what you know, the old times, the inland.
Yeah, maybe 8.
8. Okay.
Most of them that, like Tom Gelb's fish, totally legitimate.
Yeah.
There was a 51-pounder come out of Pokegama in '71. That was totally legit. Supposedly 2 50-pounders out of the Chippewa Floyds in 1942.
Oh, okay.
Flemings, who was an Indian guide, 54 pounds, and A.J. Ross, 55 pounds. But ironically, that's 1942 now. That's a long time ago. Hasn't been a 50-pounder come out of the Chippewa Floyd since.
Right.
And that was at the peak of new water, so to speak. So they flooded it in 23, 33, 40, so 19, 20 years. Those 2 fish were probably at their maximum size, and those guys happened to catch them. And every other big fish caught ever since then, and up until then were knocked in the head.
Larry, what about the recent Minnesota record, the Nolan Spinglers? Did you get a chance to look at that or talk to him?
I knew about that fish before most of the muskie world, because one of his fishing partners, who wasn't with him that night he caught it, his dad was with me. We were on a fishing trip, and he'd got the phone call right after the fish was caught. So we knew it was coming. But I'm sure it's totally legitimate.
Oh, for sure.
But the method of catch is what's gotten argumentative. With forward-facing sonar. Personally, I'm 82 years old. I got 2 bad shoulders. You'd think I'd love something where I could ride around the boat all day, watching the screen and make 35 casts and maybe catch a 40-pounder. I don't want nothing to do with it.
Right.
I just that's just me. It's not fishing.
He was out at like 9 o'clock at night. That guy
breaking ice to get in.
And so there is a hardcore element. You got to respect what he has done. So I hate to take that away from him at all. And
I wouldn't at all. I mean, he's got a legitimate state record. There's no doubt about it.
For sure. And the other thing is that it's legal to use it. So
right.
Oh, the technology thing is a tough topic. Yeah. I lean with Larry without a doubt on thoughts, but it's like the hunting. I mean, there's so much technology and baiting and everything that goes on with hunting now too, and everybody's idea of fair chase, whether it's fishing or hunting, is really going to be a tough thing.
You can't hunt the same day you fly in.
Right.
Just because you might spot something on the way in. It's a fair chase.
Yeah. No, well, like I say, I agree.
I mean, if you use the forward-facing sonar and you spot one, you still got to get it to bite. But your odds are a hell of a lot higher than if you're just casting blindly.
So, yeah. Yeah, I think that's certainly true. But, just, to sum it up size-wise, though, I always thought, realistically, one of the most interesting thing about my little, after getting my butt chewed by Jess Ross, that gave me what I felt like at the time was a realistic size range of the biggest muskies in our area.
Yeah.
When you could quiz that many guys that are literally on the water every day. And that's the one sad thing about the line and the twisting and the turning is getting that everything
and
totally
with
out of
spray,
whack.
I think it was a combination of need in 39-40 fish to generate business, but it was all eagle in 1949.
Oh yeah.
It was all eagle. Yeah. So.
Yeah. A 50-pounder's a monster.
Oh.
End of the story.
I used to think that you've got a big kahuna net. I'm sure. I always used to.
No, a clam now, Larry. Don't say the wrong.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
this giant net, I used to think it's too big for muskies. I can't even hardly lift it. But when my 54.5 pounder was in the big kahuna,
Oh yeah.
I thought, wow, you need a giant net for a fish like that.
Oh, that's true. They're amazing fish. Someday I'll catch one, or Dave Brown will get a 60-pounder, and I'll help him pound on it, and we'll make big news.
He's been fishing where they're at. I know he has.
I'm not gonna lie. I hope it's meat too.
We're cheering for you, Dave.
Yeah, I've been cheering for a long time for myself on that one. We've all been trying. There's no doubt about
Wait till you've
that.
been at it as long as I have.
Yeah. If a guy wants to go and try and find a world record fish, as you say, you got to fish in waters where they are.
Right.
Why don't you name your top 5 lakes you think?
Lakes and/or rivers.
Lakes and/or
Yeah,
rivers.
Because
Any
number one on
system.
my list is the St. Lawrence River.
Okay.
I mean, historically, since the 1880s, it's been putting out giant fish, and it's still putting them out. That's where I caught my 250-pounders. Georgian Bay, tougher fishery, much tougher fishery, but maybe bigger fish than the St. Lawrence has got, but they don't get as long in Georgian Bay. St. Lawrence fish, they get 60 inches without a problem, but the Georgian Bay fish, you get one over 56 inches, you got a super monster. I don't think Lake St. Clair will put out a world-class fish like that. 40, 45 pounds maybe, and that's just been recently since Catch and Release took a hold well.
I was actually with Mike Keys when he and I were together with Spencer Berman, and he had boated one that we figured was in that mid-40s, 45 pound, and that was a heck of a fish. And Spencer figured that was the biggest fish caught out of the system that year.
Robbie Jarnigo caught one in spring over there with 50-pound class fish.
Yes.
That was a super giant, which was a surprise to everybody, especially where he caught it.
Yeah.
But St. Clair's not historically, other than the Percy Haver years, which was we're getting back into the liar years, 1939 and 1940, 38, 39, 40. But Haver was trying to sell lures.
Oh, sure.
So what better way to help promote lures than catching world record fish? So that was his reasoning. Again, financial, just like Louis.
Oh yeah. Well, it is tough. I mean, once you get into that game, if you're willing to fib, of course,
But
you got to get a little bigger than the last liar, right?
The first ever legitimate 60-pounder was out of Eagle Lake in 1939. This was caught by a guy that never caught a muskie before, never fished a muskie before, borrowed a rod and reel, skipped work to go with his buddies to Eagle Lake, and by noon the first day, he had a 60.5 pounder. So if the scale was legitimate, then his fish is a legitimate 60-pounder. But I used to get so irritated when a muskie fisherman or a walleye fisherman would catch a 40-pounder or even a 50-pounder. But when you stop and think how many more guys are out there fishing walleyes than we are, they're going to run across the big fish that we can't get to or didn't get to when they caught it. So it's just a numbers game for as far as when a walleye fisherman catches a big one.
Oh, sure.
Because there's so many of them out there.
So you mentioned the St. Lawrence. You mentioned Georgian Bay.
Eagle Lake. Got to go with Mille Lacs. Got to put that in there. If they'd start stocking it again, it'd be a good thing.
Yeah.
They have started restocking vermilion again, which is a good thing. And there's a New Year classes starting to show up in there. But it got hurt. I did take my grandson to one of my outings, and we were on the water 20 minutes, and he got a 57 incher. So, but that's the kind of luck he's got.
That was the last year that I was there.
Yeah.
When he caught that fish. That was like...
Yeah, we got in the boat, went out 20 minutes, we were back to the dock with the 57. He'd caught the 57 incher. In fact, he just made a comment before he made the cast that caught the fish. He said, "I'd sure like to get in the 50-inch club." Bang. Got it in the net. I said, "Well,
career's over.
I think you made it." Yeah.
I think you made it.
Quit. You should quit right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, vermilion, that's put up some big fish.
Yeah, Laxul got the potential, but you can't keep one if you catch a world record. And
that's true. Yeah.
If you follow the rules to the letter, there'll never be a world record come out of Laxul because you can't control the fish long enough to comply with the rules. As far as IDFA is concerned, or Hall of Fame is concerned, of course, for my program, you got to keep the fish. Period.
Right.
So, Laxul's possibly potential, but then again, there's never been a really giant weight on a scale out of there. The biggest one I know of is 49 pounds.
What about Lake of the Woods?
No.
No.
You know what interested me about, and you saying no, so Doug Johnson, I'm fortunate enough to have spent a lot of time in the boat with him. I know his largest out of Lake of the Woods was 55 and a half, I believe it was.
For years it was 54.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dick's was right around there too. Everybody would say. I possibly got one legal there. Not too long ago, fishing with Leitner in the fall. But yeah, not many fish get above 54
and back
there.
In the days when a lot of the world records, legitimate world records, came out of Lake of the Woods, they're under 55 pounds. 58 pounds was the biggest legitimate winner. Yeah. 58.14, but never been a 60 pounder hung on a scale. You know, you hear stories. George Wall had a couple stories. But
before I forget, here then this Doug Johnson, is honest guy. I've never heard, and he never claimed to see anything any bigger than what he caught on Lake of the Woods. He claims to have seen approximately, but he said 60, and I looked at him, and then I asked him again the next morning because we were having a little whiskey at the time, but he said he saw a 60 in Laxul or something like that, and I said, "Oh, come on, Doug."
Yeah,
and he's like, "No, you know."
Yeah, there's been a few 60 inchers caught out of Laxul, but they were summer fish, didn't have the weight.
Oh, okay.
But there have been 60 inchers caught out of there. In fact, I've just been corresponding with one of the guides up there. He's got a couple of them in that category.
Oh, okay.
So, but they don't have the weight. So.
That's a long fish.
Interesting thing about Laxul, and a lot of people don't know it, most of the fish you catch there are green. But the native fish there are the spots. In fact, a friend of mine that lives here in Hayward, his son and I were out one evening there, and he got a 56 incher, and it was spotted. And everything else that they'd caught in 11 years was all green.
Yeah, I've only caught green there. Not that I've fished it much, but...
Well, they restocked it in 39 from other lakes, and they probably used the allopatric fish, which are green. And they talked to the lake biologist the next day that happened to run into him. And he said, yeah, that's the original strain that was in here. Mm-hmm. So, because it's always had pike in it.
Yeah.
That strain of fish that's in the St. Lawrence, Larry, what strain is that?
They're the spotted.
Spotted.
Yeah.
Great Lakes strain?
Well, they're part of the St. Lawrence River is technically part of the Great Lakes. Yeah. It's the outflow of the Great Lakes.
Larry, do you know, based on that, Dave and I were recently doing a little interview locally here too, and do you know anything about Great Lake strain compared to like Leech Lake strain with where they spawn? Do they spawn deeper like the Leech Lake strain overall? I've never heard much about them.
Yeah, the river fish, the St. Lawrence River fish are deep spawners just like the Eagle Lake fish were.
Oh, okay.
And that's why Minnesota had such a problem for years. They tried catching Leech Lake fish for their spawning program, but they couldn't find them. They tried, in the harbors and shallow bays and stuff like that, and they couldn't catch them. Well, then after Bernard's work on Eagle Lake that I helped with, when we found out they were spawning in 13 feet of water, Bob Strand got with Doc Cotton on Leech Lake, and they put a transmitter in the fish, and they followed it the next spawning season and found out it was spawning on chara beds in deep water. Well, the game was over then.
Yeah.
Immediately switched their program from the shoe pack fish that don't grow any bigger than this,
Right.
to getting the Leech Lake fish, and now, of course, the rest is history.
Right.
They produced for 20 years the greatest muskie fisheries on the planet. And then they let the No More Muskies people get after them and quit stocking.
Yeah.
Sad
we need
story.
some here.
Can you imagine? Here's the thing that drove me crazy too. 2006-07, we had a battle with the DNR about stocking here in Wisconsin.
Right.
And we wanted them to use the Leech Lake strain in lakes that didn't have natural reproduction or couldn't keep up with natural reproduction. And
Here, I was there.
they had nothing to do with it. But what I couldn't understand in my mind is how they could sit here and watch what was going on in Minnesota and not want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And if you go back into history and look at the old maps, half of Minnesota used to be part of Wisconsin. So if that had it stayed that way, then we'd be having Leech Lake fish all over the place. It's just ironic how that worked out.
Yeah. That is interesting.
I think that's what was kind of neat about the St. Louis River project that they did, Larry. They were stocking both strains in there, and it was actually kind of neat how with that you would see certain days the Leech Lake strain would be feeding, and then other days the green Wisconsin strain muskie was feeding. And now
Yes.
they have put in the Great Lakes strain in there. So they went
Over there and switched to Great
they
Lakes?
just went to the Great Lakes strain.
Who's putting them in?
Do
Minnesota or
you know
Wisconsin?
that, Pete?
It
I
happened.
didn't hear. I heard they were putting them in, but
I heard
technically,
Wisconsin was going to. But
Okay,
they've
I
had
heard
some,
they did this last fall.
Well, they've had some
Yeah.
had some problems with Wild Rose hatchery. They had to kill them all. They got some kind of disease and they couldn't use them. So there wasn't any Great Lakes stocked last year.
Maybe it was the year before. I know they did put some in.
Well, I did hear that. Yes, absolutely. But I didn't hear where they came from.
So they'd have to be the Wild Rose, which are Michigan spotted Great Lakes fish, versus Minnesota's Mississippi River strain. But I think, from what I know after 65 years of research and all this stuff, I think that the Leech Lake strain and the Great Lakes strain are pretty much one and the same. I mean, if you did a
You would
genetic
think.
test on them, they would be different. But every pool on the widenings of the St. Lawrence River, the genetics are different anyway. Even though they're all in the St. Lawrence River, each pool has got a little bit different genetics.
Yeah, that's interesting. Makes sense, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But, you know, you got 10,000 years of evolution. So to try to build something like that here, it won't happen in our lifetime. But it ain't going to happen at all, the way our DNR thinks. So.
I actually think that they're starting to do some. It seems like with that Great Lakes strain, they seem to be working with that strain, Green Bay, like I say.
Well, they
up here
did
now.
agree that every drainage into the Great Lakes, whether it's Superior or Lake Michigan, should have Great Lakes fish. Like the Menominee River. If they're going to stock it, they should stock Great Lakes fish. Montreal River,
Yep.
even the lakes above that drain, like Guile Floyd's, that should have, even Newslinger,
Right.
who hated
Yeah.
me and fought us tooth and nail, agreed that the Guile Floyd should have spotted fish.
Absolutely.
Should have Great Lakes strain fish, because a lot of those fish go over the dam.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and naturally, the St. Louis River should never have another greenfish put in it.
That I think they agree on now.
Yeah.
But I'm really hopeful that, this thing could start off quick with more spotted Great Lakes strain, because I just think that it makes all kinds of sense. We've got a lot of fisheries around here that don't have very good natural reproduction, and in some cases, some of the ones that used to are down as well. So, you know, if these spotted fish, not only obviously we've been through it a million times and fighting with them, Larry, our biggest selfish interest, I guess, is they get bigger and grow faster. But, you know, if the natural reproduction is better combined with that and preventing another political thing that occurs every spring around here that kills a lot of our big muskies, my goodness, it's just an absolute no-brainer to get more spotted.
Plus the fact that we've got so many water bodies now that are getting invaded by northern pike, which is going to make the situation even worse. Historically, it's known that waters that never had pike that now have pike, the muskies lose.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What better place to put spotted fish?
Yeah.
We actually have that topic coming up very shortly. We had a conversation with the local DNR here, and they are doing a study on pike relations to muskie, and Pete and I are going to reveal a bunch of that, and we are going to talk about some of the things that they referenced that we should be doing as muskie anglers to help the muskies out.
Yep.
Right.
They need all the help they can get.
Boy, do they. A lot of pressure on them these days, Larry.
Well, you know, I grew up fishing Moose Lake, and it's a shadow of its former self now.
Yeah, that's one thing I know the local guides around here are talking about quite a bit. You know, used to have quite a bit of options for action lakes, and
yeah, no, it's funny. When I was guiding, I used to get a phone call from basically rookies. They wanted to catch a big fish. I said, all right, let me clarify this for you. Do you want a fish where we've got a shot at a big fish and that's it? May never see a fish all day? Or would you like the fish where we got a chance to catch a fish that has big fish as well? Every time they'd always chose that option.
Yeah.
They never chose the big fish only option.
Right. Right.
With that, Peter, I think we're going to probably start wrapping this up, huh? We got...
I think we can. I mean, Larry and I could ramble forever, but I just don't know how long the tolerance is before people start falling asleep listening to us or not.
Yeah, better off doing another segment another
Right,
time.
right. I mean, look at Missy here. I don't know if you can see her, but she's
totally
she's
relaxed.
had more than enough.
And I got 2 dogs at home that need to be let out. So
she was sighing a couple times. But Larry, we thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Pete, is there anything we need to let the viewers at home know? You got nothing.
No, the liars suck. Liars still suck. Watch out for liars. Find the people who tell the truth. Listen to them. Liars suck. Don't listen to them.
One more last wrap up, Larry. What do these guys got to do if they were to catch a fish that they feel is a legitimate sized fish? What is the steps? Give us the steps.
Keep it.
Okay.
Measure it and weigh it only once on a certified scale. Put it in the freezer and call me. Go to modernmuskierecords.org and check out the rules on our website and print them out and carry them with you, along with an entry blank. There's a lot of things you got to do that you can only do when you caught the fish, and after the fact, it's too late.
So with that, we thank you guys for coming. We hope you guys drop comments below, and any topics that you want Pete and I to touch up on in the future, please let us know. Anything interesting, we can try and touch on that subject. Like, do Pete and Esther use the same shampoo?
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, these are things the world wants to know, I'm sure. And we can cover them. You're pretty proud of yourself.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. That was a good one.
That came right out of left field, that one did.